Welcome to the Crescendo Go-to-Market podcast. Today we have Web3 Wesley, who's my business partner, but he is better known for building one of the OG Web3 Gaming YouTube channels to 30,000 subs. He was involved in Axie in the early days, and he's also the community manager at WolvesDAO, which is the most exclusive community in Web3 Gaming. So Wesley, do you want to give us a quick introduction to yourself and how you got into Web3 Gaming?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Shash pointed out, I'm Wesley. I have a YouTube channel, Web3Wesley, as well, and we're working together at Crescendo on the marketing engagements. You can also catch me over at WolvesDAO. But as to how I got into Web3 and Web3 gaming specifically, it's a bit of a long story, but I guess we go back to crypto in general. I started in late 2014. And I don't remember how I first heard about Bitcoin, but I'd heard about this thing you could use spare computer parts and earn money. And that sounded good to me because I've always been a gamer at heart. And, so it's funny because crypto and Web3 gaming started with gaming for me, even though it began with using my old gaming PC, putting all these parts into a milk crate. And I had this ugly mining rig in my basement where I wasn't paying any electricity at the time. And it was right then that mining Bitcoin kind of became unprofitable without dedicated mining units or without bigger pools. And so we actually switched, and me and my buddies were some of the first people mining Dogecoin back in the day, which I dumped right away. Otherwise, I'd be retired, as I think a lot of us have that kind of story in crypto. But I shifted away from crypto. I wrote my economics thesis on remittance payments and how Bitcoin was going to change them and how it was going to revolutionize remittance payments around the world. But I stepped into other roles, and I ended up working in not Bitcoin mining, but physical gold mining. And I did that for a number of years, working with public companies, taking companies public, doing marketing and operations. And the whole time I was keeping an eye on crypto as a retail investor. And 2017, 2018, NFTs started popping up. And I remember one day someone sent me a deck for a trading card game. And it was a trading card game they were going to use NFTs with. And I called my buddy. I was like, whoa, how we use crypto is going to change. Like, this is revolutionary. And it's funny because the project died. It never got off the ground. And I was like, okay, so people aren't too serious about these NFT things. And I kind of left it alone. I didn't get too involved with Ethereum. And it wasn't until Axie kind of came around that I looked at gaming and NFTs again. And I was like, okay, here's something that's actually picking up. And that's when I started kind of shifting things and really focusing on the Web3 side.
Interesting. So tell us about the early days with Axie, because I think that's what you're best known for in those early days is you got really involved. You were helping a lot of guilds. You had these crazy spreadsheets for breeding and so on. So tell us about the early Axie days.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't the first, I wasn't one of the first round of people in Axie because Axie started building in 2018 before anybody knew about it, where, Geos often talks about putting a message in the Discord and waking up in the morning and it's still the same message. I wasn't around during those days. I got in as it sort of started to get popular. Before there was a documentary about Axie scholars. Before that went viral, I started dipping around with Axie because I noticed in the crypto space, all of a sudden there was a bunch of people talking about this game, Axie Infinity, like on Reddit and stuff. People in the Philippines were asking about how to set up wallets and crypto questions. And I noticed some of this and I was like, what's all this sudden hype that's kind of picking up? And I saw an opportunity there. I saw that, wow, there's actually a lot of people that want to play this game and have heard about it. And so I started playing. I started with a couple Axies just to check it out, and I did actually find the game fun. I've talked about this before. A lot of people, I think, got in only because they wanted to earn. But I've been a Pokemon fan my whole life, and I could see some Pokemon elements in the game, and the earning element was nice on top, but I did enjoy the game. And so I was in crypto, I enjoyed the game, and I thought, what, here's an opportunity for this to grow into something. I saw a lot of potential, and that's really why I kind of dived in head first and thought, what, let's try this breeding thing, let's try this guild thing, and it sort of spiraled from there.
Interesting. And why did you decide to start making videos on Axie?
So why I just started making videos on Axie, I've been casually making videos for a long time. I've monetized 3 YouTube channels. They're not as big as this Axie one, this Web3 Gaming one, but the other ones got some decent hype. I think the first one, I was making Call of Duty videos 12 years ago, and YouTube offered to monetize my channel pretty fast because I was getting a lot of views on that. I've taken the videos down since because they're horrible when I go back and look at them. But it was always a hobby of mine, making videos on the side. When I was in the mining operation too, before I started working in the office, I did some work in the field, and part of that I used to run a drone, and so I was making drone footage. And when I started working remotely, I've always been in photography, so I had a good camera as well. And so videography in general has always been something that I've been passionate about. I've worked on a few video projects in the past, done a documentary on beer, funny enough. That's a story for another day. And so I called up one of my buddies one day. I was like, hey, do you think I can fit crypto content into one of my other channels? I was doing some videos about Japan, and I was like, do you think I can fit some crypto content on here? Because I know the algorithm on YouTube doesn't like it if I start mixing and matching. And, and they supported my theory that, you know what, it's time to make a new channel just for crypto-related activities. And that was when I was just starting to get into Axie. And the original idea wasn't really Axie necessarily. And as I started thinking about it, I was like, you know what, I want the channel to be about Web3 Gaming, but there's only Axie. That's like the only game really that's any good. There were a couple in the mix, like Splinterlands has been around a long time. I was aware of them, but I hadn't played it. And there were a few games, but there weren't much before Axie blew up. And so it was kind of like, okay, I need a new channel to focus on a new topic. And so I was already doing videos, and I thought, you know what, let's make a dedicated channel for the Web3 Gaming. And I called it Attack on Axie originally, and that was a reference to Attack on Titan, just because I'm a big anime fan, if anyone who watches my channel as well. And I was like, I like the what do you call that? Association? No, the grammatic term for it is like AA with the double letter, and it just sounded good. And I was like, you know what? Eventually, if I have to rebrand this to Web3Wesley, which I did, but that was always in the start of my mind. But I was like, you know what? Let's focus on Axie. Let's dive in, because I was doing it right. I was learning these things, and it felt like an opportunity to help other people learn as well.
That's very cool. And why did you decide to kind of pivot from just Axie to broader Web3 gaming? What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, that was always the long-term goal. But when I started, there was only Axie, really. There was only a few options for gaming. And so I wanted to keep it in a small enough niche that I wouldn't have a new channel again. And so I thought the Web3 gaming, the NFT gaming space just kind of made sense. And so making that pivot was a little bit difficult, of course, because a lot of my initial audience was interested in Axie specifically. But a lot of them in general were also just, my channel was built up of a lot of like medium and small guilds. A lot of people that were doing something similar to me in the fact that they were not necessarily a scholar, but they were organizing groups of scholars, or they were buying and selling Axies in large amounts. They were participating, because I didn't really make content around how to play the game. That's the other thing when I started the channel, was I looked at what was out there, and I was like, okay, there's a few channels there were 2 or 3 back then. One in particular was large, the rest were fairly small, that were talking about how to play Axie. And I was like, okay, this content is covered. What is not covered? What have I had to learn from scratch that's been kind of difficult? Okay, like learning how to breed, learning how to set up an ROI calculator, learning how to track all these statistics and make sure that you're not wasting money, wasting time, etc. And these were things that major guilds were doing. And when I talked to the big guilds, they'd hired someone for this. But the little guys, the medium-sized guys, maybe you had 50 scholars, maybe you had 100 scholars, they didn't have tools for this. And a lot of people were losing focus, wasting money. And so I thought, you know what, I'm building these tools for myself. Here's a good niche for me to help other people. And I still get to be passionate about crypto. I still get to be passionate about gaming. But Axie was the only thing to focus on at the time. So the shift was because I always wanted to talk about more than just Axie, but there wasn't any other decent game around back then to talk about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think lately you've seen a lot more Web3 games come out that are interesting, that are fun. So, while Axie is still going extremely strong, there's a lot broader of a niche. And yeah, I'm kind of curious with also kind of your involvement with WolvesDAO. So we're both members in WolvesDAO. I think it's a really great community. Can you first give us a quick breakdown of what the Wolves are about, and then how you got involved with them?
So, WolvesDAO. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, WolvesDAO is essentially a collection of thought leaders in the Web3 gaming space. Now, I say a DAO, we call it WolvesDAO, but there's been some topic. This has been a topic internally that we're not really a DAO in the sense that it's not voting on decisions. There's no token. it's an application-based alpha group, essentially. And we have a variety of members from across game founders, devs, VCs, everything you can think of, content creators. And the central pillar for everyone is Web3 Gaming. This is what brings us together. This is what we're all passionate about. And we sometimes call it the only guild you can't buy your way into, because it's application-based and based on people's merit and experience and passion about gaming, we accept them into the DAO. And we do kick people out regularly. It's one of the things we're known for. Not in the sense that we're harsh about it, but if someone doesn't contribute to the conversation, which happens, sometimes you join a guild, etc., you're too busy and you don't contribute. So we do kick people out because we get a lot of applications and we want to cycle in new members when someone's not contributing. We are 300 members. Approximately, that number fluctuates a little bit. And we come together and we talk about everything related to Web3 gaming. And so how I first got involved was Peyton, the founder, about a year and a half ago, jumped on a call with me and just said, hey, watched your videos, like what you're doing in the space. How'd you like to join WolvesDAO? And for me at first, I was like, you know what, I'm not sure I have enough time to contribute because it's something I was worried about. And he said, you know what, don't worry about it. Jump in, try it out, see how it goes, and we'll go from there, right? And so he sent me the application. I filled it out. They grabbed me in because I had already talked to Peyton and the team, and I loved it. Honestly, the conversations are amazing. Like anything to do with Web3 gaming, whether you're a founder trying to figure out how to set up your legal structure, whether you're a content creator who wants to know how to improve his video quality, or whether you're a degen and you just want to know what's the next gaming NFT that's going to 100x. We have all these kind of conversations in the DAO, and honestly, I just got sucked in, and as I got much more involved, we have a group of admin that make the decisions, basically run the DAO based on volunteer. And so there were some spots. Originally, I was doing mostly analytics work, like how do we evaluate the games we think are worth looking at and talking about. And then that expanded into community management as well, where I take a lot of the calls and set up a lot of the collaborations we do with the WolvesDAO.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, I agree 100%. Like WolvesDAO is probably the purest and one of the best communities in Web3 I've seen. Just number one, you can't buy your way in. There's no product being sold. There's it's just purely a place to hang out. And because of that, I think the conversation quality is extremely high. And you see some of the top leaders in the industry there. It's definitely one of the places where you keep your ears to the ground there and you're kind of ahead of what's happening. And I know there are a lot of other Web3 gaming communities, and a lot of them are NFT based, but WolvesDAO by far I think is the highest quality.
Yeah, WolvesDAO honestly has become more than just a group or a DAO. It's like a family. Honestly, the friendships I've established in the WolvesDAO are very meaningful, and it's a very amazing group of people. Honestly, it's one of the other reasons that I got so involved with it. Just it's an amazing space. If you haven't checked us out, make sure you check out WolvesDAO on Twitter and fill out that application because we love to have like-minded people in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other cool thing I remember is when we went to Token 2049 at Singapore, we constantly were hanging out with the other wolves, and we had it was such a great experience. We went to that Chinese restaurant, all of us, that just ate crab with our hands. It was a great time, right? It was really awesome just having beers and hanging out. It was actually establishing friendships. Did not feel like a networking event or anything. It was just a crew of people who are interested in similar stuff, and we're just all hanging out. So definitely recommend checking out WolvesDAO. And so that brings me to my next question, right? So WolvesDAO has obviously blown up quite a bit. Your YouTube channel also has gotten to 30K subs plus. You've also done a lot of work with a lot of different gaming projects, right? So, we've worked together with Helica, where we basically did a lot of their content marketing, helped, build out the creator program, and really helped them get a lot of game studio leads. So, could you give us a very high level? I guess the two-part question is, how did you blow up your audience, and then how can anybody blow up their audience, whether it be a company or whether it be an individual who wants to be, Web3 gaming kind of influencer?
Yeah, fair. So for me, a lot of it goes hand in hand with Axie doing well, right? I can't discredit the fact that I started making content right before Axie got popular, and part of that not to sound, conceited in any way, but part of that was me making a bet that Axie would do well. I could see the demand was there. I thought, honestly, I believe in the principle of Web3 gaming and NFTs, and so I thought this is a horse I want to back, and that worked out quite well. I didn't expect the price when I started, just in like pricing terms, when I started making videos on Axie, AXS was maybe $2, and then it blew up over $100, and all of a sudden there were all these people looking for content around Axie, so that helps for sure. And the other thing was really finding the niche that no one had done, right? Because as I said, there were a couple videos about how to play Axie, how to have the best team, and how to win on the leaderboard, but there wasn't anyone who was really teaching you how do you manage 100 scholars that want to play this game? How do you breed your Axies without losing a bunch of money? And how do you put $10,000 into this game and make it as safe as possible so that you're going to make a profit and you're not just going to lose this, 10 grand, right? And I was talking about things like what are the risks as well, because I've always tried to be rather unbiased. I told people, of course, crypto itself is very risky. This space is very new. Now we're talking about altcoins. Now we're getting even more risky. And so I have no delusions that, these things aren't hugely risky in a lot of senses, right? You can see this with Axie having a bridge hack in the past. You can see this with people losing seed phrases in crypto, right? So I was making content around that too, like safety, principles, how do you run all these aspects of crypto and NFT gaming that no one had talked about yet, right? Because at first people were they have the gameplay and they're talking about how do you make the best team, right? Like traditional video game videos. And those are great. But I also knew that niche was a little bit saturated, and I kind of found this niche that no one was making. And so that's definitely something you can do. And it's not necessarily finding a niche that no one's in it, because often that's hard to do. Sometimes it's just about finding that competitive edge that no one else is doing, finding a way to make videos and add value that someone else isn't doing. And so for me, I did find a niche that was very undersaturated, but I also gave away a lot of tools. I gave away a lot of spreadsheets, as you said, that I was making. And those are one of the things I got the most compliments on. Like even now, 2 years later, some people will message me like, hey, this spreadsheet you made 2 years ago, I'm still using it. And I've adapted it for a different NFT, a different game, because it was just super useful. And so to me, that always makes me really happy. And that was the kind of way I was giving value back to the community. And honestly, people are always looking for an easy way to blow up on Twitter, YouTube, etc. But for me, some of those tools took me like the whole week to make in my spare time, right? And I just gave them away because I wanted to give value to the community. And so the one thing I would say is it can be hard work, starting a YouTube channel, starting a Twitter account, and becoming big is very hard to do. And I often tell people, if your goal is to make content full time and you just want to make money, you're going to struggle. If you find, for me, making videos was a hobby, right? That's how it started, and I really enjoyed it. And I enjoy making tools like that, spreadsheets like that. That's why it came easily, and I was able to put in a lot of work and give a lot of value to people without it feeling like a grind. And so I always tell people, like, if making a YouTube video is a grind for you and you don't enjoy doing it, there's not a lot of money being a content creator for most people. And so I think starting for the right reason is a big part of it. And then finding that niche that you can really succeed in is another part. Finding a way to give value that is missing to a certain niche or to a certain community will get you a very long way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that's one of the most important pieces that people miss is if you're trying to do something that, there's a niche that is competitive, the only way you can get ahead in a niche that's competitive is by being absolutely obsessive and like creating something that's ridiculous, right? So at that point, you're doing like 10x the effort. And I have seen friends do that, right, and succeed in like niches that are competitive. I recently had a friend of mine, Tim. He basically made a programming, like he started a new YouTube channel, and there was a video he worked on for like months on how he learned programming and got a job with it in 6 months. And it blew up. It blew really, I think it's got over 1 million views or whatever. And he's really blown up in that way. But that also, like with that competitive niche, is like requires a massive amount of effort, right? That literally took like months and months and like, maybe like 1,000 hours of work. So it's like you can, I do think that like what you did there was, essentially find a niche that was growing, right? And then create content and provide tools that nobody else was doing. So there was a lot of differentiation. And I think that's probably like the smarter way to go about it, is in terms of just being able to get like the maximum ROI. And I did something similar with my first YouTube channel, which was a YouTube advertising channel. I didn't really blow it up to crazy numbers, but I got to like 10K subs. And that was mostly through just, basically finding a niche that nobody was talking about, YouTube ads, and essentially building authority and writing a lot of content, building agency around it. And that was a great way to grow that business. And we're getting leads through content, right? So I do think that really being able to think from first principles and thinking that, hey, am I just competing with a million other people who are doing this? Or do I have a unique angle? Do I have a unique niche? And even if the niche isn't unique, am I approaching it in a way that's fresh and can allow me to like succeed? So absolutely agreed on that. Now, one thing that I'm also really curious about is you are based in Japan, right? And Japan is obviously pretty big in the gaming space and the Web3 gaming space. I'm curious how Japanese gamers view Web3 gaming. What's the feeling like on the ground there? And yeah, would love to dive into that as well.
Yeah, I would start off by saying it's not as negative, the sentiment, as it is in the West. Gamers in the West hate NFTs, and you can see this from any of the big gaming magazines. Whenever they write any kind of article, they're tailoring to their audience that despises crypto NFTs. But it's not so much so in the West. And I think it's hard to speculate on why, but I have a few theories. One of them is in Japan and in Asia in general, mobile gaming is very big. It tends to be the PC gamers that are more opposed to crypto and NFT. They're a lot more hardcore. The mobile game scene is much more casual. People don't have such strong opinions. And you can see this in your communities too. Like FPS communities can be freaking toxic as hell. But you very rarely get a hyper casual gaming community that's very toxic and very, has very strong opinions one way or the other as well. So that's part of it. And the other thing is, I think there's been less exposure to crypto in Japan in general. So people have been less exposed to some of the hacks and scams that we've seen more in the West. Part of that is to do with regulations, crypto regulations. The government has been saying that they're going to make things better in Japan, but tax regulations are pretty harsh on crypto. It's often dealt as income instead of capital gains, which just means that a lot of people don't want to touch it. And so there's less knowledge, less experience about NFTs, which can be a good thing. It can also be a bad thing. But I do think it helps with the whole sentiment. There's less negative connotations with NFTs here in the West. And we'll see. Like mobile gaming's big, even though PC gaming is been rising year over year. It's not nearly as prominent, neither is console, as it is in Canada, America, and a lot of Europe as well. So definitely a more positive sentiment overall, honestly. But I wouldn't say they're overly like super bullish on NFTs and gaming. I think there's just a lot less awareness around it.
Interesting. And what about the rest of Asia, like Korea, Philippines, Vietnam?
Yeah, I mean, Philippines and Vietnam, Southeast Asia has had exposure on the play-to-earn side a lot, especially with Axie being a large proportion of the players being in the Philippines. So I think there's definitely been some bridges burned because tokens have dived. But overall, it does seem like when I talk to these regions, they're still very bullish on crypto because they like this play-to-earn. They like the idea of playing video games and earning money. And even when it's only a little bit of money in a country where that 10 cents US goes a lot farther, that still can be quite profitable, right? Even when their token prices are quite lower. Because I think, when we have low token prices, you're only earning a couple dollars a day on some of these games. If you're in the States, you can't even buy a meal. But in some of the cheaper places in the world, in terms of like purchasing power, it goes a lot further, right? And so people tend to play these games a lot more. I still think when I talk to people, like when you talk to Web3 game studios, a lot of their audience is still coming out of Asian countries like Vietnam, like the Philippines. LATAM is picking up for sure, countries like that. But that has to do more with the earning side of things. The other thing is these are also countries that are heavy into mobile. Asia in general, is just a lot more mobile heavy. The Philippines, people have smartphones readily available with internet readily available, but not many of them have a gaming PC or a gaming console, for example. And so that's definitely a big factor in it as well.
Got it. And you just mentioned obviously like a lot of the Southeast Asian gamers, like the play to earn actually, even a couple of dollars a day works for them. But what is your opinion on like the economics of play to earn? Do you think there's a way to make it sustainable, or is play to earn as a concept flawed? Or what's your opinion around the tokenomics / viability of a model like play to earn?
So it's tough to answer that because play to earn means something a little different to everyone, right? In general, I would say play to earn is not dead. I think it's okay. It's just a matter of, and I had this conversation on a Twitter space the other day about big time. And someone was talking about how big time is pay to play. You have to buy a bunch of NFTs and stuff to play the game in an earning sense. And to me, as long as the pay is higher than the earn, you can have a balance, right? You have to have some people that are willing to pay money to save time, and then you can have people that are willing to spend time to earn money, right? People can grind in a dungeon to sell assets to players who don't have time to grind that dungeon. And we see this in Web 2 sometimes as well, right? People will spend money to buy skins and stuff that they can't earn themselves because it saves them time. So it's just a matter of knowing that there's no such thing as a free lunch. It is a zero-sum game in a lot of ways, and by that I mean not everybody can win. Not everybody can be playing to earn. If you have a play-to-earn game, you have to have people that are spending money, which means you have to have a game that is worth spending money on. It has to be a game that's fun enough with the right ecosystem that people will actually want to spend money with no hopes of getting anything in return. And then there's value for people that are playing to earn to capture some of that value rather than all of that value going to the gaming studio, right? It's a different kind of economy where the revenue is distributed differently, but I do think there are sustainable models that we will eventually see or could potentially see, but it's just a matter of setting the expectation, right? Because there's no way that everyone who plays the game can earn. That will never work. The money has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think play to earn is really, you can't have a game where everybody earns, but if there are players who are willing to spend, then there's the economics allow for some people to earn as well, right? Now, I wanted to move on to another question, and this is going back to the content and growing your audience. So obviously you went pretty in depth on how you grew your audience on YouTube. One thing I'm curious about is, so when you did a lot of work with Helica in terms of growing their content marketing and really figuring out a lot of the content strategy there, it was interesting because it was much more B2B. Can you run us through your strategy there? What were the results accomplished? And just go over how you approach, let's say, content growth for like a B2B product in the gaming space.
Yeah, sure. So honestly, even when it's B2B, the principles are not too different because what we were doing around Helica revolves back to giving value to the community, right? And in that way, Helica's content was set up in a way that they introduce the games, they give them a bit of a background, and then they would show their dashboards. They would demonstrate their dashboards and say, hey, Studio XYZ, look at how much money you missed in royalty fees this month. Look at how much your competitors are charging on XYZ versus what you're charging on XYZ. And the threads that we ended up doing, because we ended up using Twitter threads as a core pillar for the content, right? And it was a nice hats off to the game. It was providing value to these gaming studios for free, as like a preview of, hey, here's what we can do. And it was a great way to get these studios to republish or repost. Now it's no longer retweet on X, to repost these threads, which was also a way for Helica to use their existing audience, right, to engage with the gamers that were passionate about that studio, to get some of their audience into the Helica audience. And it was a way of providing value, like I keep saying, to these gaming studios that really didn't require any work from them. And so we combined this with what was trending, right? Looking at the games that were hot, the games that were talked about a lot on Twitter. Whenever there was a piece of news or a game that was in the spotlight, it meant a lot of people were looking for threads about that game. And when Helica can provide these insights that no one else had, which they can, so a lot of it comes down to, on the B2B side, is using your strength, which in this case, Helica had dashboards and analytics that a lot of the gaming space hadn't seen or hadn't had access to yet. So we're able to play on that strength, play on the strength of what's trending, looking at the games. And part of that is being involved with the Web3 Gaming audience, right? We didn't hire just anyone to write these Twitter threads. We hired a lot of the WolvesDAO members actually were people that I reached out to see if they wanted to work with Helica, because I knew they were very entrenched in the Web3 gaming space and they could identify the trends and the gaming studios that were quality that we could talk about in order to make this content fit well with the narrative currently in the space. And they would be able to write threads that gamers and game studios would resonate with, right? So yeah, does that answer your question? There's a lot of compiling factors there.
Yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense. And yeah, definitely. I think the big thing here for B2B is you really want to think from first principles, and you really want to figure out that intersection of content that is going to attract both, the broader Web3 gaming audience, because if you don't get engagement, nobody's going to see your content, right? Like, you might be trying to reach founders, but if the gaming community is not engaging with it, nobody's going to see it. And so I think there's that aspect of creating content that like the Web3 gaming community really likes, but also provides value to your target customers and gives them insights that they didn't have. So by this combination, gaming founders would actually see this content because it's starting to trend, the community sharing it. They're getting a huge number of new notifications, they're getting a bunch of new followers, but they're also getting valuable insights from the dashboard. So I do think that for each Web3 B2B company, right, it's going to be a different strategy. You really have to think from first principles. You can't just, copy and paste, but it is important to really understand that there are nuances in the space. And it's not the same as the Web2 playbook, where you may want to focus a bit more on the B2B side on Web2 with, like, let's say, doing, let's say, Google search ads, having a lot of news, having a newsletter, really having, let's say, a strong presence on LinkedIn and a lot more outreach, right? While in Web3, I think where I would start is actually starting with Twitter and then expanding out to other platforms, because Twitter is really where everybody's here, including every single founder in the space. We're all addicted to Twitter in the space, so that's the place to get started. Now, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. So, number one, what are the Web3 games right now that you're most bullish on?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Most bullish is a relative term, because I think one of the games I'm most excited for is Shrapnel. The reason I'm most excited for Shrapnel is I play a lot of FPS. As a gamer, it's something I think I would enjoy. And extraction shooters is a genre that I think has some very unique principles that will lend well to Web3, in the fact that you're competing, you're taking value from another player, and you're risking it. When you extraction shooter, you kill someone, you take their assets, and then you have to extract from the map to get those assets out of there. And when there's a value to them, there's like this whole nother layer for players and for audiences to get excited about. Now, this also lends the problem of, in that genre, there's a big issue with cheaters, people using aimbots and stuff. And when you financialize these assets, you're going to make that problem way, way more severe. So there are pros and cons to this, but it's actually a genre that I'm very excited for. And I think Shrapnel is doing it well. Midnight Society, Dr. Disrespect's game, is another one. I think I just have had more exposure to Shrapnel, which is why I lean more to that side, but I am excited to see how that goes as well. In terms of like bullish, some of the studios we've worked with closely, like I'm really bullish on. It's one of the reasons we were able to get so involved, right? One of the reasons I was happy working with them. So Pixion, for example, building Fableborn, their game is fun. Cam's a great founder, and the way they have built up the game so far has been entertaining. And I know a lot of the Wolves really enjoy playing it as well. It's not just me. So that's on the mobile side. That's a different genre. That's a game I think I'm more comfortable like using the term bullish on. not only is it fun, but I see it having a good potential to be quite successful. Whereas with Shrapnel, I think it's more of a risk, but more of a reward. And like, I get really excited about the opportunity here and seeing what develops. So yeah, other games I'm bullish about, games like AI Arena as well. I'm excited because they're doing something very different. The mixing the AI into a platform fighter where you have the opportunity to learn about AI while you play is an interesting aspect as well. So yeah. And then there's a bunch of games that have been hyped up because they have strong founders. Things like Wildcard, I think, are going to be interesting down the road for sure. And there's a lot of games that I know are building because I've seen some pitch decks from companies that are raising that aren't public yet. And there are a lot of Web2 founders that are entering the space with very, very strong gaming backgrounds. And it's going to be a few years before we see more of these games like hit the surface, even with a demo. But there's a lot cooking under the surface that I've seen that just makes me bullish on Web3 gaming in general as well.
Got it. Makes sense. And yeah, I agree. I think AI Arena, Fableborn, one game I'm really bullish on is The Bornless. I think Toby is an absolutely amazing founder, and I'm very, very bullish on the game they're building. And yeah, Shardbound as well is one that we were involved with that I think is going to do extremely well. So yeah, lots of good games coming out soon. And yeah, I guess the last question I have: what's the moment in Web3 that made you the most proud, or your proudest moment in the space?
Yeah, that's a tough one, but definitely I touched on this a little bit now and again, but. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but now and again, someone reaches out to me and they're just like, hey, this video you made a year ago, this spreadsheet that you gave up for free 2 years ago was so helpful. I'm still using it today. That to me is when I get really proud. When someone tells me that I helped them with their journey to education around Web3 gaming and crypto, because for me, that's what it's been about. It's always been about giving back to the space and helping education, because crypto needs to grow. It needs to be an easier space, and crypto in general, but Web3 gaming as well. It needs to be an easy space to onboard gamers. There has to be no friction there. And how do we get there? We get there by sharing resources, like making the education around it better and taking down barriers. And so for me, I've always just like, how can I help take down these barriers to make crypto have a wider adoption? And that's going to help everyone who's already in the space, right? And so when someone comes out and tells me I was successful in one of these goals and my resources or my videos really help them learn a certain concept or help them in their journey into Web3 gaming, that's when I get the most proud.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, that's definitely something where, it feels good to help people and hear that, that you've had an impact on them or their business or, whatever they're doing. So to finish it off, how can say that again. So to finish it off, how can, let's say, game studios, gamers, anybody in the space reach out to you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. DMs are always open on Twitter, Web3Wesley. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. I think we can put some links down in the description of this video too to make it easier. And you can hit myself or Shash as well up on email as well, wesley@crescendo.gg. Checking those regularly, and whatever is most convenient for you, but I'm pretty easy to get hold of.
Yeah, it's a pleasure chatting, and guys, go check out Wesley's YouTube channel. It's an absolute trove of information, lots of great videos in there. And thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you're on Apple, if you're wherever you are, give us a rating, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Cheers.